I had been thinking about future direction to go in my life and where it would lead me and so on. And accordingly, it was a time of great confusion for me. This was when I was 18, and this would have been 1967. It was 1967 that I was struggling with the ideas of which direction to be going in. I was at university in London, and the paths that were opening up in front of me seemed to be the path of traditional British society, the path of the permissive society that had started in the 60s at that point, the path of traditional Hindu society, and then there was a path that I saw my mother following, which was one of spirituality. And needless to say, age 18, I didn't really know what the difference was between all of these things, but there were certain things that jumped at me, and I could see that it would lead to huge repercussions moving in one or the other of these directions. And so when I went to see Dadi Janki after having been in India for about 3-4 months, she immediately started talking about conscience. So I was fascinated, and her comment was that it's very difficult to come to decisions nowadays because there are so many different influences working on our conscience. There's the influence of society, of media, of education, of family, our peer circle, all of these things, and maybe many more. And so it's become very difficult to make a decision about which direction we want to go in. And I said, well, how does one move ahead? And she said, you have to clean the conscience. How? Through meditation. And if you meditate, specifically with Raj Yoga meditation, then it means that you know yourself as the inner being, and you know the divine, the supreme. And the word yoga is connection, union, and Raja, the highest form of union. And so the point she was making was that if you meditate, then that influence from the divine begins to clean your conscience, and you're able now to understand more clearly what is right and what is wrong, and which direction is the right one for you. And so I was immediately attracted, and I wanted to learn meditation that very same day, which she organized. So I came back again to her a few hours later, and a young sister then explained everything about that inner being, the soul, to me. I see the conscience as that part of the inner being in which I'm able to see what is right and what is wrong. And today people say, well, there's no such thing as absolute right and absolute wrong. And it's true, everything's become a sort of gray area. And within that, spiritual teachings tell us that there are very specific things that are right, and there are very specific things that are wrong. And then yes, there's an in-between area too. But as I study spiritual teachings, and the more I practice meditation, the conscience becomes clear of all of these influences, so that then as a detached being, I am that inner being, but I even detach my consciousness from my own physical identity, and in that awareness, my intellect, which is within the spirit, the human spirit, the soul, the inner being, a point of light, just a point of energy, radiant energy in the center of the forehead, and in that awareness of the inner being, my conscience is cleansed, and my ability to discern is enhanced. There's also the influence of my own mind, which is also part of the inner being, my thoughts and my feelings. And so I have to come to a point where I allow my thoughts to calm down and to become very slow, and I have to cleanse my feelings so that my feelings don't carry hurt or baggage from the past, but also no fears or worries or anxieties about the future. So in this space of being in the present at this moment and allowing myself to connect with the divine, and I'm using the word divine for that supreme being, God, God's influence can start working on me, and God's influence is one of truth, of justice, of peace, of love. And so the things that I'm then guided to do are more likely to be in that direction rather than anything else. If I sometimes feel that my conscience is biting me, I need to explore the reason for this, and probably I'll find that there's something that I've said or I've done which is contrary to my own inner core values. The human spirit, the inner being, carries within itself the qualities, innate qualities of peace, of love, of truth, of joy, of purity. And when we're just living life on an external level, we don't even realize that we're killing our conscience. Or when our conscience does bite, again, we don't actually realize why this is happening. But when I begin an inner journey of exploration of the world inside myself, then I begin to understand that when I contravene my own inner core values of these original qualities that should be the guiding principles of my life, and I'm ignoring them, well, there's going to be the prick of conscience, and probably more intense in some cases than others. And even for those whose conscience is intense and is hurting them, they don't always understand why this is happening in the way that it is. And I just have to start studying spiritual knowledge to be able to find out how to make myself powerful through the connection with the divine, but also how to be able to understand things so that I move forward without hesitation in the future. I don't need any human being to guide me at that point. When I have absorbed spiritual wisdom, which has come from the divine through a human being and then been relayed to other human beings, so there's been a journey on that side too. But now I'm able to see very clearly what it is that's causing the hurt and the pain, and what it is I need to do about it, and the power that I receive from the divine also not just helps me realize, but helps me transform, so that I go through a process of transformation. It's a fact that there are many, many cultural differences, and in some cases having a relationship outside of marriage is considered really, really severely wrong. And in some cases polygamy is acceptable, it's part of the norm. And so when I look inside myself and I'm on a spiritual journey, without being on a spiritual journey, it's very difficult to move away from the cultural norms. But when I go on that inner journey, then I'm leaving behind the limits of the awareness of the physical body, the color, the age, the religion I was born into, and you come into a different domain. You come into an awareness of the rights and wrongs on a universal level, rather than the cultural impositions. And in this awareness of the inner being and the universal consciousness, then in that connection with the divine, I know clearly what it is that is right and what it is that is wrong. The state of the world is absolutely reflecting the state of human beings. And so I do feel that it's the human the human being that is at the starting point. Whatever is the quality of my thinking, my perception, my understanding, is then going to determine the quality of my conscience. And if I look at the quality of thinking today, it's very much based on selfishness and personal desires. I'm making a sweeping statement, I know, but I think if we explore to what extent there is altruism or concern for others' well-being in today's society, probably you'll find that the majority come into that area that I described earlier, just what's in it for me. And even on that level, it's more connected with monetary gain rather than my physical health even sometimes. And so we have created a situation where now it's fine to have more than one relationship before marriage. It's not even a question anymore. It's very open and it's accepted. And I don't think that's true all over the world. I think it's absolutely true for the Western world, but I see also the influence of the films that are made in the West, the television programs that are exported all over the world, made in the West. And so there's been a shift in the cultural understanding gradually of what is right, what is wrong. And so I think we are now at a state, generally speaking, where the values that we used to hold even 50 years ago have changed dramatically. I'm not just talking about the subject of relationships now in terms of purity and otherwise, but I'm thinking about honesty, for example. There was a time when a person's word was taken as his bond. And today, you can even sign a contract, and you can even use a magnifying glass to look at the terms and conditions. And yet, if somebody wants to evade a contract, they'll find a way to get around it. They'll find a loophole. And so today, even a signature is no longer my bond in many, many cases. And so all this is happening generally across the world. And so the state of the conscience of the world is, well, think about the suffering of people in different parts of the world, whether it's the Middle East or whether it's Africa, or whether it's Europe. I, again, won't name names, but you can see generally the state of the world and the huge amount of suffering that is being inflicted generally on both sides. I won't say in one way or the other, but more so perhaps in some cases than in others. But it's as if human consciousness has become dulled and the conscience has gone underground. It's as if the conscience has been attacked so much that it refuses to speak to us. Every time we see a famine on television, it dulls our sense of understanding what is humanity and empathy and compassion. You keep seeing similar images, whether it's war or whether it's famine, all of these things, and it's like we've closed off from ourselves, and so our conscience is no longer alive and functioning in the way that it used to be. And most times, in a way, it's for self-preservation, to be able to protect myself from getting into the depths of depression and negativity, because I feel helpless, I feel paralyzed. When I begin my spiritual journey of going inside, then I begin to understand not only myself, but also the impact that I plus my human family, our global family, has had in terms of the atmosphere we've created, in terms of the world in which we live, and also what we've done to the environment for the sake of money. So my conscience now is telling me something is wrong. And as I study spiritual teachings more and I reflect on these things, I realize that humans have been very much consumed by greed, but also anger. I mean, all the different negative states have been part of our journey in recent times. And so collectively, the world is going through a very dark period filled with negativity. But as I awaken and I allow that connection to guide me, I start listening to my inner voice of conscience, I begin to take a step in a direction which is contrary to the general view. And so sometimes this in itself creates a challenge, but no, my conscience is now beginning to be my guide. And the divine is also not just my mother and father, but my friend and my guide. And so I have 3 very powerful guides taking me in the direction that I should be going in. And so I see that it is a time, generally, in which the conscience is waking up. And we're beginning to see what we've done to Earth, Mother Earth, what we've done totally to the environment, and the whole balance of the species of the planet. Everything is now a little bit chaotic. And then we've also had a very negative influence on each other. Give you an example. If today I evade tax, for example, what am I teaching my children? What am I teaching my brother and my sister? And I'm very smug about it. And I say, you know, I've been able to save myself X amount. And I think I'm very proud of myself for that moment. But when I begin my spiritual journey, I realize that every time there is an action that I do which is contrary to the law and contrary to the spiritual laws of the universe, then in that awareness, my conscience begins to tell me that something is wrong. And the more I study spiritual truths, the more I realize what it is that I've done that is wrong. And so I'm very determined that through meditation, reflection, quiet time, I take help from the one above, the being of light, to cleanse the soul so that my conscience can truly be my guide for the future.